In this lesson, I'll go over a very common method of painting, which is wet on wet, meaning you continue to paint while the medium is still wet. So I'm going to take my clear brush and dip it in water and wet all the areas I'm going to start painting first. This cat is gray and white, so I'm going to start with the gray parts that are lighter. I often use this method when painting in watercolor, and as with watercolor, you want to work light to dark. So now I'm testing the ink on my test paper to get the right value, to get a kind of a light gray. Okay, that looks good. Now I'm going to paint the shadows on his belly. Remember, you can always make something darker, but you can't make something lighter. So I'm just doing some shadows on his body, and then I'll do the blobs of gray on his back next, which are darker. I'm just going to get some ink off the other brush instead of dipping in the ink well, because I don't want it to be too dark. So I'm just painting the blobs in, and I'm not trying to make it look exactly like the photo, but that's okay. Make sure you rinse your brush thoroughly if you're using the same one to paint in clear water later. Or you can use two brushes like I'm using. So I'm getting his tail. Before this area has dried completely, we can go back in with a little bit of ink on the brush and paint in the stripes. So it's cool the way the ink spreads out and creates little spindly parts that look like fur. And I'll get her tail. It's dark at the end. And then let me try the top of her head. Well, let me get her legs. Okay, let's do the top of her head. Her ear. And like I said, you can always go back in and make things darker. So I'll redo her stripes and layer on top. The water's still wet. And now do her ear and the stripes on top of the head. A little bit of her pads and the dark part of her tail. And while this cat dries, let's look at Hazel. She's also striped but doesn't have the patches of stripes like the previous cat. So this is Hazel. For her coat, I would start with a light gray. So I'm painting in the area that's gray and avoiding the area that's white. I'm just painting with some water first and some diluted ink to get the gray areas. So now, when it's still wet, I'll go back in and paint stripes. And then, like before, I can build up from light to dark. And again, I'm not really trying to paint her exactly like the photo. It's just getting an idea from the photo. Go back and get her stripes on her head and her ears. And a little bit of shadow. I forgot the shadow on her chest, so I'll add a little bit of shadow here. Go in and add her little nose and her pupils. So I'll let these dry completely, and in the next video I'll demonstrate how to paint wet on dry and when you would want to use that technique.